You're listening to The Piano Pod, where we talk to the brightest minds in the industry about how they are bringing the piano into the 21st century. Welcome back to The Piano Pod. I'm Clara Zhang.
Hi, everyone. I'm Yukimi Song.
For anyone listening or watching our show for the first time, welcome. Yukimi and I are both classical pianists and piano teachers from New York City. This podcast is for anyone who plays the piano for fun, loves listening to piano music, or for someone who is currently pursuing a career in piano or works in the industry professionally, or anyone who is simply curious about the world of piano music.
In each episode, we interview a guest speaker who has been breaking exciting new ground in the music industry. Before getting started, we want to thank our listeners for tuning in today. Please rate our show or review on Apple Podcasts because every rating review will help people find our show.
So this episode is about us,
Yay!
The Piano Pod. We are going to talk about why we started, where we are now, where we're going to want to go. You know, Yukimi had a brilliant idea summer of 2020 when the pandemic first started, and she approached me and former co-host Eric, and it was like, we should do this podcast together. And the first guest was a musical psychologist, and it was amazing experience. So I thought to myself, well, I love podcasts. I, especially before the pandemic, when I was traveling a lot, that's what I listen to when I'm commuting. That's what I listen to when I'm working out. It's like, just something that I just listen to all the time. And so I love the concept of the podcast. And also it's, I realize it's kind of a positive way of bringing the community. For me, I always want to bring positivity into the classical music world. So yeah, that's how we got started. And Yukimi, what about yours? I know you have huge goals.
Yeah, I think in the previous interview or episode I mentioned, so there was this one professor approached me. We had a lunch together because of some sort of
That's right.
meeting. And he's like, your background is communications. And have you heard of podcasting? I'm like, I don't think so. That was back in 2007. So but I was still using iPod. Remember
That's
iPod?
right.
And then not before, that's before smartphones. So podcasting, okay, that's interesting. But I was not in the right place at the right time, not yet. So, but that had been back of my mind. And then around that time, I brought this idea to you guys. Podcasting already was the thing.
Right.
And it still is a thing, and it's growing.
Absolutely.
And I didn't realize how much of an impact that we can give to the audience. Radio show, I used to listen to radio, and radio shows are hosted by professional radio hosts who've been doing this in the industry of entertainment for a long time. But podcasting is for anyone. You can do it. You can do it. Anyone can do it. Oh, by the way, so toward the end of this episode, we want to show you how to start a podcast. 5 simple ways to start the podcast. So just stay with us.
That's right.
Anyway, so that's the reason. And then one biggest reasons that I wanted to start the podcast was probably from teaching. So before I came to New York, I was teaching in college. When you're teaching in college and college level students, doesn't matter what they are going to become afterward. They may become music therapists. They may become go to other directions in their lives, but their mindset was already there. But I didn't realize until I came to New York and started teaching young children that there was this misunderstanding, miscommunication, or disconnect between me as an educator, but particularly as a pianist, and the market.
Yeah.
The way they think of piano is like, oh, everything is so comfortable and easy and la 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 la, right? As opposed to we pianists, we practice all the time. We don't even
Mm,
have time for anything else. And not even then, so play this, you know, etude in certain tempo. That's really challenging still,
mm,
right? And then, so that really got me. And some of the parents of the students have huge misunderstanding of learning experience.
sure.
And I thought I needed to do something,
Mm,
but I just felt like I was a little guy at that time. And also I needed to establish my life in New York, so I couldn't I could dare to say no, or no, that's not how it's supposed to. But I just let them have it because
mm,
I just did not know how to communicate, and I
mm,
did not know how to set the boundary. So now that I am, grown up woman,
mm,
and I have more experiences. So I wanted to use this platform to figure out where does this disconnect come from. And
mm,
I wasn't teaching somebody who wasn't educated. Actually, matter of fact, downtown Manhattan, I was teaching. They are all educated people from
yeah.
very famous Ivy League,
Mm-hmm.
graduates from Ivy Leagues, and then they would
Sure.
say something horrendous, you
Right.
know?
Mm-hmm.
And I was just, so then when they see classical pianist or classical piano,
Right.
or do they even listen to classical music? Do they even know what this piano lesson would bring? I don't
Mm-hmm.
know, and I really appreciate them for bringing their kids to piano
Sure.
lessons, but they have no clue what it
Mm,
takes, you know? So that's the
absolutely.
start. Sorry, it's a little long
Oh,
explanation.
nothing to
But
apologize. No, it's actually I am learning certain new ideas from you, even just from this talk. I mean, I think that was the main thing for me as well. I obviously am, for those audience that has been following, I'm a talker. I love communication. I have been, on sort of this personality, I guess, growing up, that I was always sort of very bright and bubbly, and I'm not shy of speaking up. I was always into public speaking and motivational speeches also. I have been in that world for a long time. So but sometimes I do feel like it's also important, like for my personality, like for some people, if they need to solve some problems, they journal, they write things out. For me, it's like I kind of have to speak up, and then these sentences I speak sometimes get all the clues together, and then I understand. So I really appreciate your sharing of that, and I had similar experiences, not exactly the same. I would say that I think for me the challenging thing was always how, as a teacher, I believe that I always want to find this the light, the positive light, and which I'm sure myself struggled as well when I was younger. I start training pretty young, just all of us, and I went to the conservatory pretty young. But at some point early on, I started to, like, I never had idea of, like, I was very sure that I was going to be a pianist from very beginning, but it was always this why, like, why do I keep on going, why do I love it, and I'm always asking why, and it's kind of leading me to places. And I see that some of my children, very young students now are teenagers, and they're still disciplined, they're still practicing, and despite, they would say a lot of their friends have already stopped, and they're not, practicing hours, but they want to continue on. And it's also the why, so I think and even class, professional musicians, like friends of ours, sometimes when we keep on going, working so hard, there's always this why that so I think the podcast also gave us a chance to connect with so many musicians or pianists of worldwide to ask their whys. So
yeah,
I
yeah,
think that's
yeah.
been a very positive
Sure.
thing.
And I also wanted to connect the classical musicians
Mm,
to the audience, as in audience of the podcast, but also literally like parents of the students I dealt with or
mm,
I used to deal with. Like, this is what it takes. This is
yeah,
their story. But also, I also want the classical pianists to realize you have to come out of your own world to
mm,
reach out to the audience that
sure.
they have no clue. But if you tell them or teach them or
Yep,
demonstrate them in such a way that there are so many opportunities
you
down
got
the road or
right,
performance,
right.
but you have to engage them. You have to engage with your audience, right? That's kind of a it word or sentence these
Yep.
days, engaging in audience. So yeah, that's what I realized, and that's the reason why I wanted to do. I think it's the both sides. I think before pandemic, everybody was in a very comfortable place, got used to that comfort zone. Then
Mm,
pandemic taught us like you gotta come out of your comfort
comfort
zone
zone.
and and reach out more people and communicate and start creating more much meaningful relationship or much bigger community. That's what I felt. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. So what do you think about all the guests we invited so far? I mean, we have actually quite a roster
Rockers.
of
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, so many, right? So many for our guests that we really just met via social media, which is something I feel that's kind of new, for, and I, again, sometimes I do get, trapped into this. I have this idea that classical musicians were a little more, we're a little old fashioned, like we like to hide in the practice room, just practice. And but I think through this journey of podcasting and connecting with our audience, and I mean, even just the most recent episode with Constantini,
yeah,
where he is,
Claudia Constantine. Yeah, that
that's
was.
right, and he's showing us his Bordonian, right, and the
Mhm,
piano. That's quite cool, and the Black Bog. That's
mhm,
definitely a fun episode,
mhm,
especially when we were able to connect with Ray, Rimac,
mhm,
and
mhm,
so, but again, but so many, and the new episode that's coming up this coming Monday with
mhm,
Dr. Nuken from NYU. Oh my gosh, I was so honored to have her to have a chance to speak to her, and
mhm.
so yeah.
Yeah,
What about you? What do you think?
yeah, I think so. Let's just talk about the social media
Mm,
perspective. So, actually, how we found people through social media started from who? Frederick Chu?
yes, that's
Yeah,
right.
right.
Yes,
Before then, we had some sort of personal connections.
yes.
Then, but Mr. Frederick Chu, I think Eric knew him. I mean, he studied
Mm.
with him once, but that was like a
Long
long
time
time
ago.
ago, and it was
Right,
just a master class. So he wasn't sure, Frederick would remember him.
right.
So then we just got in touch with him somehow. Oh, creating a playlist.
Yes, yes.
I think, and then he was like, "Oh," and then thank you. Then that kind of started the conversation. So, yeah, I think that's how we started, and then since then we have quite a even first episode of this season. Jeffrey Beagle,
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Beagle,
Of
I
course.
got in touch with him through social
Mm-hmm.
media.
Yep.
Yeah, and so since then we have quite a lot of people who, we never knew of them,
Yep.
but through social media, especially Instagram, like watching them play.
Yep.
Just I was basically following hashtags
Mm-hmm.
like pianist or
Right.
pianist's life or one of those hashtags, and I discovered quite a few pianists. Yeah.
Absolutely. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's not only showing that, social media can be done, and also, these amazing, amazing pianists who is really like, out there, but yet they are still open-minded enough to be
Mm-hmm.
connected with this relatively young platform, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we think of social media as young people's, but it's really, it's just I think all of us have the tools, and that is
Mm-hmm.
really the positive side of
Mm.
all of it, right? So,
Yeah. This social media, there it comes with bad, good and bad. And then
mhm,
if you just focus on bad, it's really exhausting
right.
and daunting thing to do. And there are so many. Uh, um, Even if I have been lately quite active on Facebook,
Hmm.
just because of my business side of the things that I want to do. And there are so many weird messages that I get, so I have to filter. But
Yeah,
that's just comes with this whole thing of social network. But if you use it in such a way that it brings us so many positive things, yeah.
of course,
Hmm.
absolutely.
Okay, so what do you think was the common denominator
Mm,
among guests that we brought? What sort of things you heard in common? Although we interviewed so many different people from,
sure.
from all over the world,
Yep.
literally, and
Hmm.
some are psychologists, some are practicing mindfulness, some are, concert artists who have been performing
Yep.
constantly, or some are recording artists.
Hmm.
And so, what do you think was the common denominator? Like, what was the reason we invited? What attracted us? You know?
Well, our goal is to interview someone that is, not only a musician, but also someone breaking new grounds, right? So
Mhm.
I do think that is one thing that I experienced, talking with, again, it's very much an honor, and to really learn from them that, to me, I realized it doesn't matter how famous or big or how, and they're such warm people, and they're
Mhm.
just so genuine,
Mhm.
like amazing is amazing people that.
Right.
So that is and then also, the being able to be living in the modern world, connecting us
Mhm.
via these platforms that we're on.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and then also I heard stories of struggles and
Mm,
challenges too with each
absolutely.
guest. And not only the COVID period of time,
Yeah.
and I guess everybody really struggled because their performance opportunities were stripped away. But
Mhm.
during that time, all these artists that we interviewed, they were able to, or they struggled, but they found another passion project,
Yes.
and that actually brought their artistic expression to
Yeah.
another level. That was
True.
quite inspiring. And also, I think to me, the common denominator I found was their passion.
Mm.
It's not really about ability.
Mm.
You also of course have to have the ability, but more than talent, I think they because of the passion, they have the reason of hard work. They have the reason to practice hard or
Right.
create something new. Or and I also remember Ming Kwan,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Ming
Yeah, I was
Kwan,
just gonna say, yeah.
yeah, mentioned about mission. Yeah, it's not about just loving this musical instrument or music, but
Hmm.
you have to have the mission. Like, what
That's
is your
right.
mission? And that really spoke to me. Huh, that is very interesting. So,
Yeah, I think also part of this bringing back, bringing things back. Min Kwang was, one. Alexandra Lee, I
mm,
think, was another pianist I've interviewed that, it's like a nonprofit. It's a
mm-hmm,
part of their mission as well, aside from being this concert artist that they
mm-hmm,
are. And yeah, and again, Professor Min, that she created this project. American Beautiful, right? And then she had
mm-hmm,
all these art composers writing new composition, and
mm-hmm,
celebrating instead of in again, us being foreigners, being international, crowd, that we understand that there has been some bad things happening in the world, and then
mm-hmm,
absolutely, but instead of just complaining about it, we
mm-hmm,
can do something to
mm-hmm,
perhaps in like inspire the world to see the brighter side of it, and taking some actions to change. So yeah, that I found very meaningful. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, same, same. I have been, I don't know about you, but I have been very blessed to have all these guests who were willing to be on the show, and more to
Absolutely.
come,
Right.
and more exciting guests to come. And plus, I'm very grateful for you, Clara,
Oh,
and to
of
sticking
course.
with me and to
True.
be here. And I'm hoping that we can continue this for a long
Yes.
time
Yes.
and with our own tempo. But
Mm-hmm.
I have a plan for the summer with this piano part too, so that's to be
Okay.
continued. What are so far the challenges, do you think?
you know, when we approach any sort of project, I'm sure there's always the up and down side. Nothing is, if everything is plain, then there's no fun.
Mm,
So for me, I feel like the challenges for our podcasting, and I was thinking quite hard on this, and well, honestly speaking, I do, Yukimi does so much work in our, project, and it's really inspiring. But for me, sometimes I am a type of person that I do enjoy fresh ideas.
mm,
Sometimes, when we have a format, so that sometimes it's a little hard for me to stick with it. But I also find that's actually a way that actually works really well,
mm,
especially with our project.
mm,
So yeah, that's one thing that I wouldn't call it struggling, but as some of the audience probably could see, I don't know if you do follow our, like, I used to do a lot more social media stuff, content, and then but then once in a while I would back off a little, because when I don't have fresh ideas, I don't like to post. And so I feel bad for Yukimi, but she just pick up all the, but she is amazing. I mean, you're really amazing that I like your way of approaching things, we just keep on going. So yeah, I think in that way that we are balancing each other out for sure.
mm.
What about you? What do you think?
Our challenge would be I all the things that I spend time with editing and finding guests and creating content, writing scripts, writing newsletters,
Sure.
writing a lot of writing.
Yeah,
And I
yeah, yeah.
didn't realize how much I love writing.
Mm,
And also, yeah, so any tedious work I do, I am enjoying it actually.
mm,
And I guess that's how much I love doing this show.
sure. Yeah.
However, the challenge is always, always would be social media, right? I
Right.
mean, as I said, I just talked about positive and negative, and I try not to sound negative, but I think social media, to be consistent, you really have to plan your week,
Mm-hmm.
ahead of time, and when you want to post and what do you want to post. And I'm also creating all the content, like the writing part of the social media ahead of
Mm,
time,
mm-hmm.
and even creating hashtags and everything is so it was when I post it, it's just a matter of cut and paste so that I
Right.
don't have to create it on the spot.
Right.
And I don't know if it's working or not, but at the same time, because
It's
of
done.
that, I was able to contact with other artists. So, in that
Absolutely.
sense, to establish the presence
Yes.
or profile of in social media,
Absolutely.
it's been rewarding, but I wouldn't say it's the best thing ever. I hate it.
Right.
Honestly, it's
I
a
mean,
really daunting task, and
sure.
then I can't. I don't deny it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
I know. The consistency that you
mm,
keeping, that's really the positive side.
yeah.
I mean, we talk about this a lot. Like
Mm-hmm.
for me, when I used to be doing it quite a bit, sometimes on one day I would spend hours and hours, and then
Mm-hmm.
if I can't come up with something fresh, then I get so beat up, and then I just don't want to do anything for a few days, so these sort of things are also not great. And that's, I think, one thing I'm learning, from working with you with the podcast, that sometimes it's just like as a pianist, some days are good days, like we talk to our students too.
Exactly.
Some days you want to practice so much, some days you don't feel like it, but you push yourself anyway, right? Because with piano playing, it's a lifelong event. So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
this is the same thing. So
Yeah. So you really want to minimize the ups and downs, you know?
exactly.
And otherwise, I think that's what happens with, to me, that's what happens with celebrities or
Mm,
Hollywood, right?
mm,
So, I mean, we just had this thing of Oscars, that big
mm,
drama, slapping and everything. And the person who won the Oscar, he was the one who caused this problem. And then
mm,
so it's like good and the best of the best in his whole life, entire life happened, and the worst thing in his life happened at the same time, like
mm,
in a split second, like simultaneously. I can't even imagine it. That's a very hard way to live,
mm,
and having to be consistent, even good and bad. We go through this waves of good and bad, but we want to minimize the differences, right? Otherwise, it's just extremely difficult to live.
mm.
And yeah, I'm just saying this because it just happened like this past weekend. So,
Sure.
anyways, but yeah, that social media has been a really drama for me. But other
Mm.
than that, all the things I do, I love, and I can't. I'm to me, I'm so happy. I am sticking to it.
That's amazing. Yeah. So, well, let's now talk about the lessons we learned from doing this cup podcast, especially during this COVID time.
The I don't know about you, but going into COVID was not really difficult for me.
Right.
Yeah, because I felt like everybody was going through this bad situation together.
Mm.
I mean, bad things happen in life, and then
Yep.
I have plenty of bad or
Sure.
really, you know, tragic things too
Yep.
happen to me. But that time I was alone.
Mm.
But this COVID situation, I know there are some families went through some tragedies, and I can't even think of what they're going through right now. So I'm not taking this very lightly. But
Mm.
as I was getting into this COVID, I just I felt like I wasn't alone. Everybody is on the same boat. Everybody was confused,
Right.
and a lot of us lost jobs, and I
Yes.
lost some students and everything.
Mhm.
But and then so while during lockdown, as anybody else,
Right.
there were a period of time of reflection.
Hmm.
So what have I done? What I'm going to do from now? And
Right.
then especially the change was happening so quickly during the
Mm.
COVID with this, how we even do this podcast together is everything is online and
Right.
things are changing so rapidly. I realized that during COVID, but everybody was on the lockdown, and the only thing I could do was to take classes and learn more about different things. And I discovered so many different things during that time.
Hmm.
So it's been great, but also it's been challenging. So now you're coming out of COVID. What have I done this past 2 years?
Right.
Okay, I have this wonderful podcast I
Hmm.
created. I'm very proud of, and of course, I created with my teammate,
Hmm.
Eric and Clara, of course. And you guys have been such a great support and team, and also you are part. Like we are teammates. I'm not just doing this alone. So but then now what? That has been quite a big question for me,
Mm.
and I want to go. I'm seeing where I want to go, but it's
Mhm.
gonna be a big journey. You know? Yeah.
For sure, absolutely. Especially, I think for both of us, we had one common thing. We both became American citizens during
During
this
this time, I know.
during this time, which is in a way, it's yeah, now we have it, and it almost
Mm.
doesn't feel like that big, but for years that was like one, as musicians, especially or artists, that's
Mm-hmm.
and a foreigner, obviously, that
Mm-hmm.
we fight so hard, and
Mm-hmm.
it's really one thing to prove to the world that I am capable of doing what I do, because then it has to gain me a new citizenship,
Right.
which is a quite a interesting thing. We don't really think about it. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, yeah, I mean, the beginning of pandemic, yeah, like you said, that was not difficult. Not too difficult. I think, especially personally, I kind of had a tough year the year before the pandemic, and
Mm-hmm.
so which almost brought me to a meditation retreat center upstate, right before the pandemic when started, so which was my first time. I went to this mountain to just like calm my mind, rather than normally
Mm-hmm.
I travel quite a bit. And so when the pandemic first happened, I remember this. I had a concert at Lower East Side, and the next day, basically, the world kind of like went into a pause. And I had this brief moment. And I was like, "Am I gonna be okay?" I'm like, "Are my students are going to like continue online? Like, is this even?" A lot of our students are still relatively young, right, at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But what I guess was very amazed. In the very beginning, I would say that maybe 95% of my students just switched to online automatically, except a few, like I have a few students that are over 80 years old, and they really had a little hard time with technology, and they went to their house up in the mountains. So which is understandable, but and so that was, and then I was also very involved with volunteering in this personal development world. So I was it was kind of cool also, in a way, that I am a person that's very active. Before pandemic, I'm just out like 24/7. I only come back to sleep, basically, or practice, I guess. So it was a way for me to kind of just quiet down for a little bit, and yet I was still, but then I start to feel like, this year 2022 is finally my year of reflecting. After I came back from Europe last year, I start to realize, great, I'm busy. I've been busy my whole entire life, and then what? It's like, so I'm actually appreciating this time. I'm forcing myself to work not as crazy hours as I used to. I guess it used to be sort of a norm or a comforting. I always call myself workaholic and everything. And so this is so I think that's one main thing for me, that I learned. I can be happy not going out to a million places, doing a million things all the time. And I can be happy to just have a calmer life for a little, for a little change. Obviously, it's not going to be forever, but I'm appreciating this experience, this new experience, So, yeah.
Hey, I think our audience wants to know who Clara is, like really. So,
All
what's your
right.
personal story? Is it any challenges in your life, or success, or hobbies? Oh, any I don't know, trivia,
Right.
like interesting story, hidden talent maybe.
I love to eat very spicy food.
I noticed that when we went to the restaurant, she's like,
More,
pouring all these
more
hot
spicy.
spices over. In it was already a hot, spicy meal. It was a Thai food, and I was like, "Whoa, girl!"
Well, I am not shy of sharing myself, and sometimes I almost feel like I that's one thing I have to learn to as this platform that we are bringing in the podcast, and as much as it's it's fun, engaging, but because I think that you had the communication background where I never had this training, but it's kind of just well, I mean, I take a lot of courses, so I realized one thing I had to sort of learn is not to well, how do I put this? I so again, one thing I learned is that for me, some people, when they're shy, they stop talking For
Mm.
me, if I'm a little uncomfortable in a situation, or if I'm shy from something, then I start to talk so much, which is something I had to learn to watch out, during our interviews. Some, especially some I really, really, like admire, and I feel like, oh my gosh. And then I start to go on and on and on. So that was a very interesting thing that I learned about myself, which I find that to be kind of fun as well. Just we have to um, learn about ourselves. But what I do, I am, so everybody has known, I'm a pianist and classically trained, and I grew up in China, and I moved to the United States, Topeka, Kansas, actually, when I was 17 years old. After I came to the East Coast on a 10 days tour, or 12, I guess 14 days tour. We played 10 concerts, and including traveling. So it was a fun experience, but I didn't speak English, and I just happened to meet this teacher, and who gave me a scholarship, and then so I thought, all right, why not. So that was the beginning, and then eventually I always sort of knew I want to move to New York, and so right after graduating, I got a full-time gig, and I moved here, and that was a cool thing. Again, I'm someone who always feel like I'm very blessed with what I have in life, and so I do think a lot of good things has happened. And I met Yukimi really not long after I moved to New York, and we have had this really beautiful, dear friendship that really inspired me to keep on going, and eventually, opening up my own business as a piano teacher, and performing, and now podcasting.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's basically where I am, and still where that I think it's an ongoing exploration. It's being a classical musician, really, I think we will retire the day we leave the world, maybe even more. Yesterday was Bach's 337th birthday,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
my
Mm-hmm.
students were all so excited. We have this little Bach statue here. So it's really, I find it to be a privilege to be a classical musician, living a life this way.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, what about you, Yukimi?
Wow, that's a deep into your
Boom.
conversation. So I was gonna really just say something really light, but to me, I guess I hardly talk about myself, but
Mhm.
that's why, the other day we had a piano salon at Clara's home, beautiful studio, and I got to play on, Clara's beautiful Steinway piano, and there were some really nice Clara's friends came, and we were able to play, and we were able to talk about music. That was very nice. And then that's, people ask, so, people usually think, you're Japanese, or your last name sounds really different. Is that a stage name because you're a musician? That's why it's your last name Song. Actually, no. Then I started talking about my identity. I'm Korean, but I was born in Japan. Then, all the stuff. And then Clara's like, I really never knew what your nationality was until
We
we
start the
started the
podcast.
podcast.
Right.
So I hardly talk about myself because even just explain that portion of my life takes about 10 minutes. So I'm like, I try to stay away. I'm just like, make it really simplified. And so, I mean, without make things too complicated. So there's a book called Pachinko. It's a
Mm,
novel. Somebody gifted me, but it's about my background, nationality. So I'm still not being able to read it because I think I'm gonna see what my mother's generation, my parents' generation, or my
mm,
grandparents' generation went through. My uncle,
right.
or my friends, my uncle's friend, or my father's side of friends went through, and I know the fact because I've seen them.
I see.
And even so, all these things will kind of affect generations to come, you
For
know?
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so my thing was, yeah, I was blessed, but also it was, I mean, it's been a hard work.
It's easy.
Honestly.
Yeah.
I did a lot of impossible things.
Mm-hmm.
So to share that, sometimes you really have to be careful what you share, as you said. So I try to keep it to myself. But I guess if you want to find out my parents' generation went through, you can read the book, and I think it's becoming a movie.
Mm,
So, but that doesn't mean my parents owned a pachinko store. It's a gambling place. But
mm.
no, my parents never did went into that route, thankfully. But they had plenty of stories. I mean, they're both passed away, but they both passed away a long time ago. But
Mm.
stories where they went through some, quite tough things. And
Right.
yeah, so without being too deep and dark into this story, but I am so grateful for where I am
Hmm.
and just getting a green card was so incredibly difficult,
Hmm.
you know.
Yes,
But
I second that.
citizenship just came, U.S. citizenship just came like this.
Of course, of course.
And I was like, is that it?
Yeah.
Really? So, but I am very grateful, and
Hmm.
I look forward to more opportunities to come from this podcasting and meeting
Yes.
more people. So,
Yeah.
to end this part of this conversation, I want to tell you about
What are
hobby.
your
So,
hobbies?
yeah, let's end on a positive note. So, Clara, what is your hobby?
Well, I do enjoy motivational speaking, or personal development work. So that's one thing I would sort of call it as hobby. Um I dance ballet recreationally. So I tell everybody I am only 20 years. This is my 20th year as an introductory to ballet student. So that's also another thing I do on the side.
Yeah.
So what about you?
I have my biggest hobby would be yoga.
Mm,
Although lately I'm a little sluggish, and I also love Pilates. But those two, I got to the point where I was kind of intermediate, I would say. Well, yoga, I became quite advanced, but now these days I work out from home, so I'm a little sluggish, but I love yoga. I love Pilates. Those are my two hobbies. And I also love cooking, although I am terrible. I'm such a
no,
horrible.
that's not true.
It
I
is true.
tasted your food.
Yeah, no, but I'm not good at it. But I love. There's something about the process that comforts me. It used to be very big stress,
Mm,
but now these days cooking is. So, and oh, I want to tell you something. Another new discovery. For now, it's a hobby. Is crypto and NFTs.
NFT, right? Yeah.
I know Web3. Hey, folks, Web3 is coming, and then we really have to be educated with this. And then there's a lot of resistance or stigma. But remember when the internet came,
Yeah.
right? I remember what people would say. Why you can buy things without going to the store and somehow going into the computer and buy stuff? But hello, we every single person has Amazon account and Amazon Prime, and so those things have this resistance, but actually things are really moving forward and advanced. And so I'm hoping to learn more about
Yeah.
NFTs because NFT may help musicians to have more ownership of
That's true.
creation. Right. So I am still new to this idea, but I'm part of this community, online community, and there's eventually I want to invite the creator or director of this community and to talk more about crypto. And you have
Sure.
to have the knowledge of crypto in order for you to have the knowledge or experience with NFTs.
Mm.
So yeah, I want to invite her eventually. We'll see how it
Hopefully
goes.
next
But
season, right? We'll
yeah,
have
yeah,
a
yeah.
different type of guests coming to our show.
Yeah, but don't get me wrong, there are a lot of scammers out there, but scammers are out there for anything. Even
Mm.
like I got an email from today from, oh, I want to give out my piano. Have you
Oh
getting
yes, I
these
get that all
emails?
the time.
Yes.
Crazy.
I know, right? But they look real people, but they are not. So scammers are everywhere. So you just have to be educated, knowledgeable, and open-minded. So yeah, that's my hobby.
That's
Anyways,
right.
yeah, yeah.
That's amazing.
So, Clara, any encouraging words to the audience?
Yeah, well, I was thinking that I think one thing is that if you're not sure of something, just do it, just try it and do it. That's really taking the action is everything, right? And a lot of times we are mm, again, it's nothing bad of being a musician, but that means we were also taught to be very disciplined from early on, and we tend to become more or less a perfectionist, and I can even see it from some young student that, well, I think one huge thing I learned that sometimes is really not about like being the best, which we often strive for, but it's really if we are just being willing to put ourselves out there and just keep on going, and that's, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think, Yukimi?
Oh, I agree. I
Yeah.
think just try it. Exactly. And we really don't know who we are until you we try it, right? And we just
Exactly.
get stuck in our own ideas, especially classical musicians, because
Hmm.
we're so self-critical, which
Yes.
is sort of important. You don't want to be always,
Very
oh, I'm
important.
great.
Of course.
Doesn't work that way. But, however, you really don't know until you try it to see what you got, what it takes, So I think that's a very good advice, and I concur that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think again, like another thing, I feel like that I have been thinking quite a bit, in the last some years, but it's don't always say no first, which I do think we have this tendency, right? Like, mm, we have different teachers and different method we go through, but again, it's the sometimes we are more like we're trying to be safe, it's like say if we're going to play a recital and we normally don't want to play something we're not like 100% sure yet until it's like 300% sure. But and that was also my thing, when I was younger, but then little by little as I grew older and older I started to do a lot more informal concerts, which I could not even imagine, when I was younger. I just so many concerts I play, and it doesn't matter if I'm playing in a nursing home or playing in the 3,000 audience auditorium or concert hall, that I always felt like if it's not perfect I should not play, which is something I learned to almost respect myself. It doesn't have, it's not that if it's not like, for me, I used to not perform anything if it's not memorized. But then I had this teacher in grad school, and she was very amazing in playing contemporary music. And so she says, if you have to spend that much extra time to memorize versus if you can learn to play all these other pieces with music, what is wrong with playing with music, and these days that we have the technology like iPad, for example. And I think that's sort of a new thing that I have adopted to appreciate and then accept, and it's okay. I
Yeah.
don't have to be a pianist who memorize everything, and yeah, we can still bring beautiful music to the world.
Sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. That's a great message. Yeah.
Well,
So,
so Yukimi, tell us there's any promo that we could do for,
sure.
yeah.
I mean, for me, okay, I am obviously a pianist, but I love to teach.
Mm-hmm.
But I teach students who can commit.
Mm,
Doesn't matter what their
sure.
level are. So I have actually quite good group of students,
Yes.
young and old.
Mm-hmm.
And one just performed at Carnegie Hall, who was 14 years old. Another
Beautiful.
high school student, she, composed her own song, wrote her own song, and produced using software like Logic Pro,
Oh,
very
very
complicated audio, software with her friend, and now her songs are streaming on, Apple or iTunes or
wow.
Amazon, and her music is pretty much a big part of her life.
Hmm.
And although she is going to go to college studying something else, but music will be a big part of her life, and I'm very proud. And I have an adult student you know, who had this decades of corporate experiences, and then all of a sudden he quit. But along the time, we have been doing the piano lessons, and then recently he became a pilot. And he was
Hmm.
a pilot, but he was just doing the pilot thing on his own for hobby. But he became a licensed, commercial pilot.
Got it.
And so all these people, then he plays Chopin Prelude, for example. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And then I
Mm-hmm.
have another student who just be on a show, a morning TV show called
Oh, this
Today's
morning.
Show.
That's
Yeah, this
right.
morning, yeah, on NBC. And then
So
her
cute.
artwork was displayed at the Rockefeller Center in Midtown, and so she was interviewed by this news anchor, and but she actually plays piano really well.
Mm-hmm.
Chopin Etude and all that, and she is competing different competitions this year. So I love students who really find I want to help students find something in music, something
Mm-hmm.
meaningful. And so which means piano lessons could be quite intense sometimes. And
Yes.
that's my personality too. But, I want to help them, to find what music means to them. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a goal as a piano teacher. But also I am starting to coach piano teachers too.
Mm-hmm.
And how you're going to establish your own piano studios. How are you going to market yourself? How are you going to combat with some impossible parents? Or are you going to write, studio policies, for example, or so many other things? What are the piano literature out there? I am very good at that. Or how are you going to teach technique?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And how are you going to teach students per student, like this different students has different abilities? What are the resources out there to help students, let's say, to prepare for big performance? And
Mm-hmm.
how are you going to prepare, how are you going to prepare your students to be able to play on the stage in the flow? And
Absolutely.
I want to help music teachers, piano teachers, to equip. So I am doing that. So if whoever wants my help, please let me know. And also, obviously, I want to make this platform of podcast to much
Mm-hmm.
bigger eventually,
Okay.
and inviting more guest speakers, and eventually having to have this a week of seminars where musicians or piano teachers or pianists can equip financially, and
Right.
one big lesson COVID taught us
Mm-hmm.
would be the finance, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so I want to bring those experts to teach us, and also mental wellness and
Mm-hmm.
marketing, for example. So, I want to really develop that sort of platform eventually. Yeah, that's my
Absolutely.
promo. How
That's
about you,
amazing.
Clara?
And don't forget to check out www.yukimisong.com, right? Is it your
Yeah, yeah, and then yukimisongstudio.com. Both,
studio.com?
both,
That's
both. Mm-hmm.
That's right. That's amazing. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that, Yukimi. Yeah, for me, I am sure most of the audience have come to know that I don't have a namesake, after me for my studio, but my studio is called Rational Music Studios.
Mm-hmm.
That so again, rationalmusicstudios.com is my website, and I started my studio, my teaching studio. Really, it came from this philosophical standpoint. I guess it was sort of I wouldn't call it obsession, but it was something that I always loved Bach's music
Mm-hmm.
from early on, and
Mm-hmm.
growing up, it was almost I was kind of shy to even talk about it because it was not cool enough. It was not like Rachmaninoff. It was not like Scriabin. It was not the most flashy, contemporary things. But yeah, as I go through life, I had this sort of as musicians, we do obviously have to work very hard, and then we obviously have to have some talent, but I always, you know, feel that you know, it's a sort of a new discovery, I guess, between ourselves and from our students and from the generation above us or below, that we see that, you know, like for me, sometimes I do get these, you know, people who are not musicians may say, oh, you're talented, or, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and my teacher and I still talk about this, but talent is only just 2%. What
Mm-hmm.
is, you know, sure, if you can, if you're not tone deaf, if you have 10 fingers and you can, you know, understand, you have some certain emotional ability to understand that you're basically talented, you know, that,
Mm-hmm.
but yet the hard work really comes.
Mm-hmm.
So I always kind of mix with the philosophy and Bach's, you know, way of living. You know, I read all of his biography. So yeah, so that's where I started my teaching studio. And again, I feel very blessed that, you know, I guess one thing about my students is they tend to stay very long term. And some of them have been, you know, have a couple of 80 years old, and one of them, he's been trained for over 65 years.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, we just found his journey from 1947, so
Oh
now
my goodness! Oh my
been,
goodness!
he's been trained for about even longer than that. And the dedication they have, and, you know, he was never a professional pianist, but, you know, he plays Chopin etudes and or movie music, or, you know, whatever, Bach. And to me, it's inspiration to be able to
Mm-hmm.
connect with them, you know, like. And then obviously I also have very little student, you know, I talked about the 1 4-year-old, now is 6 years old, you know, and yet we did over 2 years online, and it's 1 hour lesson grueling with this age, that I'm very inspired, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
I also have some students that are, you know, they obviously, piano is not the most biggest part of their life, but it continued with them. Like one student, he was like, I'm sure everybody knows everybody except they don't know me. He would have his lesson like 9 or 10 o'clock at night. He's graduating from pre-medical school, and he got like almost full score into medical school. And after all these years, and, you know, because of the pandemic, he actually had to move back home, which allowed him to continue lessons because his sister studies. And he was like, you know, I feel like piano is the most interesting thing in my life right now. You know, those are the inspiring, you know, stories. And then a lot of high schoolers, you know, again, they're often asking me, you know, they are, you know, it the week, you know, week, a lot of the kids that I teach, they don't take breaks at all. So if there are 52 weeks in a year, they would take 52 lessons, you know. And that is something that almost drives me forward as well. And it doesn't matter if they are, you know, super good in a lot of other pursuits, but this is something almost like fundamental that grounds us. And so yeah, so that's
Oh, that's
obviously the podcast. And I've been very blessed to be having. And then also one last thing is that as of last week, we restarted my concert series at Russian Music, you know, with Mr. Stanway here. So so for those musician friends, or, you know, anyone that's interested, please contact us. And we're gonna have every last Friday of the month, we will have a Russian music salon. So we will be playing for
wonderful.
each other and have
Yeah.
some beautiful wine and good
Yeah.
time.
We want to show you 5 basic steps to start a podcast. 5 simple steps. Really simple. So, step number 1. What is it, Clara?
Message. What is the message that you want to bring?
Exactly. What is it so important to you? Why do you want to start a podcast show, right?
That's right.
Yeah. What's the problem?
Mm-hmm.
What is the problem? For us, what was the problem, Clara?
Well, what are the top, you know, experience of our, for us, we want to connect, you know, with the different audience from different part of the world. And you know, and we want to continue our teaching, but with also, you know, a fresh understanding, you know, from different aspects. Yeah.
Sure. And the solution was the podcasting. Then what's so unique about us was bringing the groundbreakers
That's
of
right.
our industry into this podcast show. not there because yes, classical music is traditional, very traditional. Conservatory teaching is traditional, but people have different aspects and experiences. So that's what we wanted to bring. All
That's
right.
yep.
Then
And then
step number two is audience.
audience. That's
Right?
right. So, who are our audience, or who is your audience if you're getting ready to start your own journey as a podcast host? And also the styles, right? It's do we want to have, again, we are both, I think, very into podcasting, listening as an audience ourselves, right? So there are very casual, conversational podcasting, and there are also much more serious, formal, and I love both, personally, but
Yeah,
you
me
have to,
too. Depending on the, how you want to carry the message. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
yeah. And number three,
Format.
that's right.
Yeah, format is so important. So, what is format? So, what's the length? How often do you want to do?
That's
Right?
right.
And yeah, those things. So, that's something that you have to decide.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And once you
Now,
decide, you
yeah,
commit to it, and
exactly. But although we went through some changes,
right.
right, depending on what the audience wanted, how audience wanted to listen to us. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we split the episode in half. Sometimes we didn't. So we're still figuring out, but that's something that I guess we changed along the way. But format is important. And Clara, what is number four? Step number four.
Branding.
Mm.
So we have to have your name, I
Mm.
remember when we gave our name, the piano pod, and then
Mm-hmm.
the three of us were thinking, and
Mm-hmm.
I think I was in Jersey Shore that day, and I was just like, all right, let's do it.
Yeah.
It was really cool. And the music.
Mm.
So for our music,
Uh-huh.
Eric actually wrote our theme song
Yes.
and that was beautiful. And
Yeah.
logo,
Mm.
and
That
you get
was.
so many choices. I
Uh-huh.
remember, you're so good with researching, and we just stick with it. And
Mm-hmm.
it was beautiful, really.
Yeah. Became our
Uh,
logo. Yeah.
that's
So
right. And
cool.
then what is our number five, Yukimi?
Step number five is technology, or yeah. So that comes with all the gears we have. So Clara has really nice microphone. What is that brand?
The Blue Yeti, even though
Oh
it's
yes.
red.
Yeah, that's a nice one. I have this one. I got this whole set with the headphones
Mm.
from Amazon. It was cheap, but it works, so
Oh,
it's
it looks
okay.
very professional. Yeah. So
And
we have
then
to learn.
yeah, exactly. And plus, we also have to find podcasting hot hosting platforms,
That's
and
true.
we kind of went through, tried to figure out which platforms work
It's the
best for
best.
us, and then so
Right.
far, Simplecast is working.
That's
So,
right.
hmm
And we are really appreciating every time when we check our data, from
hmm
our audience from the
hmm
world. And it really it brings this warm feeling, that
hmm
the hard work is being paid when we see different
hmm
audience from different part of the world
hmm
that listen
Yes,
to us.
I
So
know, I know. Yeah, so it's great. So with this hosting platform, you can broadcast your platform podcast to iTunes, to what is
Spotify,
it, Amazon, to
uh-huh,
Spotify.
Audible,
That's
Spotify,
right. That's right.
iHeartRadio,
Google.
Pandora,
Mm-hmm.
right? Those
Yeah.
are, some of the top, and Google. I think
Mm-hmm.
there's a
Mm-hmm.
Google
Mm-hmm.
podcast, and
Mm-hmm.
there are probably many more. I remember one time we did a research, and we found out even just that one research, and this is a year and a half ago. It's like
Mm-hmm.
at least 30 something.
Wow. Yeah.
So yeah, we're
Yeah.
out there. So
Yeah.
find us.
So, yeah,
Yep.
these five steps. So let me just review. What's the first one? Message.
Message,
Second one,
audience,
audience. Number three,
format.
format.
That's
Number
right.
four, branding.
Branding. Yeah.
Number five, technology.
And hosting platform.
Yes, that's right.
Ah,
So that's all it takes. Easy peasy.
that's
Mm-hmm.
right.
Yeah.
So that concludes this episode of the Piano Pod, everyone.
Thank you to our wonderful audience and fans for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate and review on whatever podcasting platform you use. If you're watching us on YouTube, remember to hit the thumbs up button and be sure to subscribe to our channel. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. The links are in the description below.
That's right. If you're interested in being the guest or recommending someone to be on our show as a guest, or if you like to sponsor, collaborate with us, or should or even giving us some ideas, new ideas, inspiration, or even criticism, we welcome them all, really.
Yes.
Shoot us an email at pianopodnyc@gmail.com or send us a DM via social media.
Yes, so we'll see you for the next episode of the Piano Pod. Bye, everyone.
Ciao.